G'day, welcome back to Matt's Workshop. Today is an update on what's been happening in the workshop over the past month and a little bit, and just like to keep you up to speed on what's been going on. Now, I haven't posted a lot of videos, and part of that is because I have a job which requires me to work 32 hours a week or 4 days a week, and also I'm studying part-time university, so time in the workshop is limited. But today I have a day off, and I thought I'd just go and show you quickly what's been happening in the workshop. But I'm going to do a small project, and that project is making an end grain chopping board using some cypress pine that I have. Now, these pieces of cypress have been thickness so that they're both or all exactly the same thickness and width, and I'm going to chop those into bits and show you how I go about the glue up. Now, it can be messy and it is a bit of fun, just going back to the thickness and the width, it's especially important when you have these end grain boards, when you're doing a glue up, that the panels or the pieces are exactly the same width and thickness. Now, that's a good one, thickness and width. So I hope you enjoy the project, and thanks for visiting Matt's Workshop. Now, as I mentioned, once I've got the boards all the same thickness and width, I now need to chop them down into the size that I want for my chopping board. Now, the board that I want is probably going to be about 50 millimeters thick, so I'm just going to set up my drop saw or compound miter saw to cut all the pieces, obviously taking out some of the extra knots that may cause the board to have a defect at the end. So stick with us and I'll chop those up now. So I've set my stop block here to roughly 60 millimeters, because some of it is going to be lost when I after the glue up, when I send them back through the planer, just to tidy it all up and prepare it for sanding. So I'll get my safety gear on and we'll start chopping. This next bit is the fun bit, where you can get glue all over your hands and make some awesome patterns with the cypress pine. Now, the cypress pine smells really great when you cut it. All these pieces have been cut to size, they're all the same thickness and width. And what I'm going to do is just try a couple of different patterns as we go, and see which one I prefer. Board. First of all, I'll just quickly re-top up my glue pot. I'm using Titebond glue, and it is safe for use on food preparation boards, so that's a plus. I don't know how many pieces I've cut. I sort of lost count at about 60, but I know there's way more. Now, previous boards I've used about 112 just in the one board, so there's a few defect ones there, but we'll go through and pick those out and see how we go. So while we wait for that glue to dry on that butcher's block, I just thought I'd continue the update. Now, part of it, something that's happened in the past week is a friend of mine gave me a nice piece of 100-year-old hewn pine. Now, I'm stuck for ideas on what to make out of it. At first I thought I'd make a stool of some kind, but I'm going to leave this open for you guys to give me an idea on what I can do with this piece of hewn pine. Now, it's too good to chop up into little pieces, so I'd like to keep the raw or live edge, but even send me through some pictures of similar ideas. I've been hunting Instagram and Pinterest for ideas, but I'd love to hear some of yours and see what we can do with this. Another piece of timber that he gave me, he did tell me what it was. I'm not sure if it's oak or maple, but there's a nice slab of that. That could be made into a nice board just as it is, polished up, but we'll see. I've also got another piece of hardwood. It's a bit of unidentified hardwood. I'm no good with identifying timbers, but this is a very fine grain hardwood, quite dark, but yeah, I'm going to be making doing a project with these when I have some spare time. Well, it's been about 3 hours or just over that these clamps have been on. I've actually been to the dentist to have a tooth repaired in the meantime, so it was not a long wait. But anyway, now I'm going to pull it apart and show you what the next plan is. So, let me just turn the camera around a bit. You can see that at the end there I put on these extra pieces on the outside. Now that serves two purposes. The first one is so it's got something to keep it all together and clamp it together rather than have these free little pieces just sliding all over the place. And the other thing is when it goes through the planer, especially on end grain, the planer can chip out the board. So if it's got a sacrifice piece at the end, then it'll get chipped out rather than the board I want, and then I'll slice it off with the table saw later on. So time to unclamp and see what we've got. Also had a couple of these clamps break on me while I was gluing it up, and I've been to the hardware store and they've quite happily replaced them for me. So unfortunately I didn't have as many clamps on there as I wanted to. We'll save them for the next one. So the glue up didn't quite turn out how I wanted to, so we'll see what result we've got. I've also got my teak or cypress wood filler for some of the imperfections. It comes up quite good even with those there, so let's have a look what we've got. Here we go. So a lot of glue squirt out there. Nicely joined up. There are a few small gaps that need to be filled, but first of all I'll clean the majority of this up with a bit of a chisel just to get it off, and then we'll run it through the planer. So there we have it, after a lot of planing backwards and forwards just to get them all level. I've got that at 50 mil, which was my original planned thickness. So the next step is to cut these side pieces off and then sand it up and finish it off. So now I've cut the sides off using the table saw. It's just time to start sanding it up. Always sanding with the grain. So the rough bits get saw marks off. Use the belt sander with 40 grit, sanding with the grain. I'm going to go all the way around that, and then I'm going to finish it off with the orbital sander with much finer paper. So what I've done so far is rough sanded the edges. I haven't used the orbital sander yet. That's just to get all the saw marks off before I do the final finishing. And part of the features of these chopping blocks that I do is I put a little hand finger hole at the bottom, and you may have looked at another video which is a few router tips, and this is using the same principle. So I've set up my router here so that we've got all that sawdust out. I'll just adjust the camera and you can see I've got two blocks set up with the router bit in the center, and now I'm just going to run the board across there, and we'll have the two finger grips or hold on the bottom of the board. So I've sanded it with the orbital sander with 80 grit, 120 and a little bit of 240 there. I don't want to finally finish it, because what I want to do is get it as smooth as possible and then just go around and fill some of the holes. Bought this afternoon when I was down at the hardware store. It's a Timbermate wood filler and it's cypress colour, so hopefully some of the small little imperfections, there's not very many of them, but I'm going to just cover a lot of the board with it. No harm in getting any that I don't actually see with the eye, just getting it nice and smooth before the final finish. So I smooth it on. There's a couple of imperfections. I am a bit of a perfectionist. I pick at all the little tiny things with my work. And then if I'm not happy with it, it ends up in the scrap bin, which I don't like. It's quite warm today, so it's drying very fast. When it goes pale colour, it is ready to sand, but I usually leave it just a little bit longer. Make sure it goes as hard as it can. This stuff is supposed to dry as hard as wood, so we get less cracks and crumbles. And now I'm just putting it wherever I want. I'll flip it up on the side. That side's good. The other side had a few little cracks in there. We just touch those up. I think now I'm being just too fussy, so I'm going to leave it there, let that dry and give it a sand. So what I've done is finished it off with the sandpaper, and now I'm just going to give it a coat of tung oil, and the project's finished.